Right, I'm here. Welcome to Varn Blog, and I'm here with Jason Myles of TIR and regular columnist for Sublation Media. And we will be talking today about his two recent articles from the end of January. Trump is having his Chinese democracy moment, and by that, what we actually mean is the Guns N' Roses album, and it's a contemporary left, the lifestyle brand. And I guess I'll just tell people what we were talking about before the recording because it's directly relevant. I was saying everything's a lifestyle brand because people are incentivized to be dumb. And the reason why they're incentivized to be dumb, and I'm putting quotations here, is the media and the way they interact with the world right now is so mediated in such short bursts, and it is designed to induce dopamine and false confidence that you are actually seeing declines in executive function. That's the ability to hold information and attention for long periods of time. That's a trend that actually goes back 50 years. It goes back to television.
Sure.
So we can't blame the internet on that. But it getting down to as short as it is. So when I was in high school, Jason, the average student had about 30-minute attention span.
Okay.
Right? Which doesn't seem long, but it's a sitcom, basically. Today, the average student has about a 5 to 9 minute attention span.
Sounds about
and
right.
There's study that backs that up. All right. And we see, and we might be sounding like we're waving our finger at Zoomers.
Yeah.
What I find interesting, that's becoming true across age brackets.
Yeah.
So it's not just that the youth are having this problem, although there are compounding issues with the youth. And if you want to talk about that, we can talk about that. But like everybody's attention span is basically about 9 to 10 minutes now. I mean, I find myself, and I read a lot of books, but I find myself struggling to read a book more than a half an hour, and I know that I am disciplined about this. So
this is my own opinion. I started to notice personally that my attention was all over the place when my ex left in 2016. And I would have moments of silence in this place that I was now in alone, and I wouldn't know what to do with myself. There'd be a computer on. I lived in this warehouse, so I could have my instruments on. I had an iPad on that was kind of like a TV at the time. So there was just, it sounds silly, but when I was making music, I'd also have music on in the background. Not even as inspiration. It was just like kind of, I needed a certain level of white noise, which is even weirder considering I lived in a place that was filled with musicians and noise. And so I stopped. When I finally got out of there, I said, I don't want to have devices in my room when I go to sleep. I don't want to have a phone have to wake me up. If you come to my place in Mexico, I actually have a clock that I use to look at, right? And I don't keep phones in my bedroom because I felt like I wasn't enjoying things the same way I was enjoying them. So even watching a movie, and even the people I hang out with, if we're watching a movie, they're watching their phone. If the movie's good, and then once that action scene or whatever crazy monster jumps out scene is over, they need to go back and look at a device, and for no reason, right? It's not even like it's going off. It's just, it has to be going on. I don't return text messages while I'm driving. There is something to be said about the attention span of people across the board. I've talked about this on the show before, but I had this gig job where I was helping compile research for a advertising research company where we had glasses that track your vision. We had you watch a 20-minute episode of Modern Family, which was popular at the time, and you were given a device. It was locked out of certain apps, but you had other things that you can do with it, and it was to see what people do during commercials, where people's eyes are. It is funny to know that men and women, everyone's eyes were following her name? Vita Guerra's
Mm.
butt. That was funny. But there's so much going on that I'm sure you've done this, and people watching this have done this, where it almost becomes an option paralysis. You got a movie, you got a book, you might even have your laptop on, doing something there. How many times have you had your laptop up and your phone next to your laptop? It's like they're both doing the same thing. Like I can receive text messages now through my laptop if I really need to. So there's a lot to be said about enjoying a moment. Even the singer Billie Eilish, who would be a Zoomer, told everyone at, I think it was Coachella she was at one year, and she goes, everyone, turn off your phones for a second. Don't record me. Look, this is a moment. How cool is this moment? Because we're forgetting, like, it's so funny that you're saying this. So I forgot Derick and I were going to record this on a Sunday. I mean, I knew we were going to do it, but I forgot it was Super Bowl Sunday. Ben and I are at our neighbor's house watching Super Bowl. And one of the things that me and the neighbor were talking about was how quiet the Super Bowl was. I don't know if you've been watching it at all, Derick. It's fucking quiet. And when they keep panning to the crowd, it looks like a crowd from the first Super Bowl. And I say that because the first Super Bowl, merchandising isn't a thing. So when you watch those early football games, there's men there in suits. And when you look at this Super Bowl crowd, there's not a lot of jerseys. There's $10,000 a ticket or something like that. So who's going to the Super Bowl? People taking selfies, people having other conversations. The game now is the background noise to their lives. And I think that just says a lot about where we are.
Yeah, it's funny because I've seen people respond to us when we talk about this with okay boomer talk. I've now been baiting the internet by entitling anytime I touch any of these topics with
which
okay.
I'd like to say that's the most boomer conversation ever, because that comes from the boomer generation of saying we don't listen to anyone over 30.
Yeah, so, I was literally reading this book to the camera the other day, Culture of Narcissism, and it was talking about how the baby boomers had this crisis when they hit 30 and they all gave up their politics, which I think with millennials has happened at 40. And the reasons for it are structural as much as just age, because, for example, the media institutions are paywalled in a way that the tech institutions are freaking out, probably more than they have to, but a lot of the publicly traded ones that don't depend on government contracts are losing a ton of money. And so they're all freaking out, leveraging in case there's some kind of government response. Or policy changes, and so they're laying a bunch of people off and then like needing people and rehiring them and going through a cycle, which can often be a death spiral. Actually, what's funny about that, just to be a Marxist for a second, is that companies tend to lay people off as a way to recoup losses because it's one of the only things they can control within their own purview. Almost never does it work to recoup losses. What tends to happen is a spiral. Service declines, you don't have enough people to do stuff, less people go, you have to lay more people off, etc. This is well known, and yet it never stops it from happening because, well, companies can't answer to a bunch of shareholders and say they can't control their hemorrhaging of money. Chill out. They have to do something. Similarly, I mean, and this leads to like maladaptive, even from the capitalist perspective, like maladaptive responses, because once you get into this spiral, you actually do tend to start seeing monopolizations happen again because people buy these assets for cheap once they're spiraling like this, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, I mean, we saw like you talk about woke politics a lot. I don't talk about wokeness directly because I find it's a confusing term these days. But I think we're seeing a lot of the quote woke initiatives, or the DEI initiatives in particular, in the private sector which tended to be in like media and whatnot, are being rolled back, or at least just paused. People are still doing their, well, we're going to do our 15% pledges and this, that, and the other, because it's not really that hard to do. And they can advertise the shit out of it. But in the long durée, with a lot of stuff moving back onto shore, we're talking about reshoring a lot of stuff back to North America. A lot of the politics of the millennials, which ended up being, for all the talk of socialism, mainly a cultural politics. That's
I agree with that.
all gonna come to kind of an end soon. I think we'll still see it in universities, but the universities are about to collapse. They both have a demographic. I mean, they're not gonna go away, but like they're already 3/4 adjuncts who teach there.
Did you read that article I sent in our group chat?
Which one?
The compact one that about the guy that was like the DEI guy. He was a big anti-blackness guy, kind of a Wildersonite.
Mm-hmm.
He got out Wildersoned by one of his students.
Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot of that. But I think also it's just you're noticing it has less and less cultural cachet. Like Democrats kind of bring it up, but not really. You've noticed they've really cut that rhetoric back and kind of kept it in certain spots.
Both parties want to have some sort of racial reckoning to a degree, even when and I said this on the show, I don't remember if you were on it, even when DeSantis has his all-out war on black lesbians and intersectionality. He mentions that black history is as American history. So he's not denying that fact.
Yeah, that serves two purposes, right? It undercuts the whole like for example, with the sexuality bill in Florida being labeled by liberals as a "Don't Say Gay" bill, when there were actual "Don't Say Gay" bills up until 2012 in a lot of states. And what Florida's doing is actually weirder and in some ways more extreme. Technically, you're not supposed to mention sexuality at all of anybody's. So it's like, don't say what would be more apt to say it is, don't say sex exists below 3rd grade is what the bill actually is. But of course that's impossible not to acknowledge in some way. So what I find interesting about that, how it's related to what you're talking about, is it's an easy political football.
Yeah.
Because the right can always say they're mischaracterizing what we're doing. And honestly, even if the intent is what liberals say it is, and in some cases, I'm not even sure that's correct, but in some cases, clearly it is. Even if the intent is that, they're not doing it the way they did it in the past. And the way we're selling it as if we're fighting this in the 90s or in 2008, but by people who also don't remember that time, because
that's
they've also
problem. That's a big problem, that there's so much anger, some of it righteous, about political figures of that time, and people that didn't, I wouldn't even say grow up, they just weren't even politically aware. They just didn't care. Losing Obama was a huge political loss for the establishment in general, because a lot of people had fear about that, because people looked at it as like daddy's taking care of everybody. The Obama hate in 2016 didn't look as bipartisan and multiracial as it looks now.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I was an Obama skeptic all the way back in 2008. And I've told this story many times, but I used to get equated, like everyone could just call me a racist immediately.
Easy.
Because I would be like, well, the ACA doesn't do what you say it is, and Obama never said. Honestly, sometimes I was like, he didn't lie to you. You just didn't listen to what he said.
It would have been you and a bunch of libertarians. right?
Yeah, it was actually. Those were my bedfellows. It was like me, Ben Burgess back in those days. That was when Ben and I probably had a closer politics in some ways, honestly.
Mm.
And we were all just, we were Obama skeptics, and we were basically tarred as something like Bernie Bros before that was a thing.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Um,
And the Bernie Bro thing was kind of silly in and of itself. It almost felt like when you mean Bernie Bro, you mean fan of Chapo Trap House in that
right,
era.
right.
Um,
And that's been a floating signifier too. Now Chapo fan is linked to post left because of criticizing NATO, right? Like, because having a neoconservative stance on the Ukraine war is now a left wing position. And I say that as a Russia skeptic.
but are these even like left positions? I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out. So these articles are kind of to support the major thing I'm doing, which is this kayfabe full-length documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And the main script is done, but I'm adding a new kind of thesis statement for the very beginning, something me and the director have been talking about as we're piecing everything together. And what really ignited me to do this, because I think we had a good intro, and he's like, I don't know, man, I think we really need to hit it home with what we're trying to say here. I was watching last night, Derick. You remember Scott Peterson?
Mm-hmm.
A&E, for those of you that don't know, A&E did a 6-part thing on the Scott Peterson trial. And I was thinking to myself, if we think about moments that will define an era, the Scott Peterson trial was trumping the Iraq war. And I think more people know Scott Peterson than the general. There was no Schwarzkopf at that time that was, taking the America, imagination by storm. More people know Scott Peterson than the real woman's name in Roe v. Wade. But everybody knows Roe v. Wade. And people think they know about that trial. And there was a lot of things that documentary, it doesn't say that he's not guilty. It just says there's facts that you think you know, but you don't know. And what was really good about it was there's the news people that were covering it. And it since it happened in the Central Valley, which is about 3 hours from where I'm from in the Bay Area, it was Bay Area news people that were covering it because the disappearance of Lacey Peterson happened day after Christmas, which is extremely slow news time. So when they picked the story up and the story ended up getting legs, you hear these news people going, dude, we have another OJ on our hands because we can create content that gets you angry. And that's going to sell newspapers and that's going to, sell ad time. That's all we want to do is make you angry with this content.
So we
That's
talk
kind of
more about the OJ trial now than we do about the first Iraq war, just to point that out. And that's also they're contemporaneous to each other.
Oh, it happens. It happens almost 10 years, exactly 10 years, I think, before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And if you think about OJ, if you remember, OJ's trial preempted playoff basketball. Like
yeah. No, we stopped school to watch it. Like
the Bronco chase. But that wasn't the only thing going on in the 90s. I mean, you have this crazy ethnic cleansing in the Balkans. And if you ask the average person what was going on in this year,
it'd been like Amy Fisher trial.
Oh,
yeah, no, and that was during the Balkan Wars, which is going on like the entirety of the 90s. I mean, it's funny because the Balkan Wars are something I think about this myself. I should bring it up because I'm a high schooler during this time period, right? I guess you were too.
95. I graduated 95.
Okay, so yeah. I'm 90. I'm 99. But
yeah, you and Ben are the same age, yeah.
So I'm going up through this. I'm thinking about like all what I remember from the media, and I'm like, oh, I remember Joey Buttafuoco, and I do remember of course, I remember the first Iraq War, and I remember like in the 80s, I remember even as a little kid, big stuff like Tiananmen Square, the Berlin Wall. But then in the 90s, I'm like, there's big stuff happening, and yet most of what I remember until I'm in college and then looking on it backwards is is like the dumbest celebrity news. Like, it's like, okay, so you have the Amy Fisher case, you have Tanya Harding, you have these things that are everywhere, but like in the grand scheme of things, not important. And yet we're not talking about stuff like what was going on in the Balkans. How was the Russia transition actually going? Remember somebody on Twitter yelling at me that like the American worker didn't care about what was going on in Russia because they were only in their own interest. And I'm like, the American worker had no fucking idea what was going on.
You only know about
Russia.
News was not profitable, and it was something that the major three company, NBC, CBS, and ABC, were doing as being good corporate citizens. We'll provide you with news. It's a loss leader, and I don't care how much money you want to spend on your documentaries and your exposés. Not really a big deal, because we have these other shows. Jack Benny or Jack Parr will pay the bills. You guys just do your cute little thing.
Yeah, you're like the public. You're our ability to say to the public we have some value, and
yes.
So like
we're not just greedy. We're not just greedy whores selling ad time.
But it was also literally on 3 times a day for half an hour. Like, people forget that. I'm like, the news came on at like 6 or 7 in the morning. It did come on at noon for a half hour. It came on at 6 p.m. and then again at 11. And then you get the national news for a half hour after that. And I know people like it was like the screen time for each event was tiny. Now, yes, in the 90s you had the beginning of CNN, but people forget it takes
the 80s. You have the beginning of CNN. That's how the kayfabe documentary is going to start. We're going to start with the 80s, but
it takes a long time.
It's a long time before it gets profitable, because it doesn't really get profitable until the first Iraq War,
right?
Shock and awe,
and then it falls back, and then it's these celebrity trials, right?
It's OJ. It's Phil Spector.
Mm-hmm.
It's Jenny Jones, and that launches doesn't just launch the CNN and later Fox into the stratosphere, but then you get Court TV and all these other types of 24-hour news networks. And keep in mind, we have also started to have a 24-hour sports network in the 80s as well, which people thought was insane, because what are you going to fill it with when you don't have licensing deals for the NFL or the NBA? So how you connect with these things was Wide World of Sports. That was a emotional connection that you're getting to curling, to skiing,
right,
to ice skating.
I think
the agony of defeat.
People talk about like parasocial and YouTube, and I'm always like, you want to see parasocial shit. I mean, YouTube is a good place, but all these sports commentators forever, and I mean going all the way back to the 70s, those are pure parasocial relationships.
Watch Wide World of Sports. That's what it was designed to do. It was Derick. It was literally designed to make you have an emotional connection to sports that you didn't give a shit about.
Like bowling.
And those people then went into things like 60 Minutes, where they were like, well, how do you make people watch a news program for an hour? You don't cover the news. You cover celebrity stories. Those are evergreen.
And real crime.
Real crime is evergreen. Think about true crime Think about when people say Derek Varn's a sellout because he did a show with X guy. Okay.
If I was a sellout, I'd be a true crime podcast.
You'd be a true crime podcast. You'd make so much more money. I think Pascal was on the show, but I used to do a totally different audio show where I would interview people, and thank the Lord that Pascal told me to stop, because I was running myself ragged. And I got hit up by a guy that said, hey, I do true crime stuff, and I heard your show, and I think we could do an interesting show on the murder of Sam Cooke. I was like, okay, that's cool. I know a little bit about that story. So I did some background work. The guy had written about it, actually. And we did a show about Sam Cooke. And at that time, I was getting more downloads for this Sam Cooke show than like Adolph Reed appearances and stuff like that were, maybe bigger draws, because people really do dig true crime. I am a person that watches true crime. Again, I was trying to fall asleep and I put on a Scott Peterson thing. I'm not immune to this, but what I found so fascinating by it was none of the news people were lying about what it was. And I don't want to get into the minutia about the trial and things that we may not know about the trial that we thought we knew, but because you're watching this from the standpoint of, the big ball to drop in that case was when the girlfriend had a press conference, a woman named Amber Fry. What I didn't know about that person, he had only seen her a handful of times. It wasn't like this was some love affair that you're going to kill your wife over. This was just, he's a shitty dude that was trying to hide a woman so the press wouldn't find out.
It was more or less just a hookup.
It's all it was. It's all it was. And it got blown out of proportion and became, for most people, this is why he did it. And I don't need to tell you any more facts. You can just start going on your own. The Nancy Graces of the world, they're not reporting facts from the trial. It's all conjecture. So when you look at news nowadays, even the big cable news networks, MSNBC, Fox, and CNN, it's just conjecture. It's just, to your point, sports broadcasters coming on and doing play-by-play. I did a show with Emma Vigeland the other day. I did her sports show. And I had to say, I was like, look, because she's mentioned something about a team. I'm a Denver Bronco fan, and she mentioned something about the quarterback. And I was like, look, I don't know how the team feels about him, and I don't know what that means in real life. This is a sports franchise. I refuse to believe that everyone gets along on every team. I'm sure it's like any other place of business that might be slightly different. And to say that, well, this guy's a cornball and that's why people don't like him and that's why the team is failing and yada, yada, yada. It's like, that's what people say to fill time when there's nothing else to say. You've literally created a story out of nothing. There's no proof. There's no players that have come out and said, I hate this guy. We never like him in practice. None of that ever happened. But people will create these stories. Why do we think it stops in the arena of sports and doesn't exist in the arena of politics? Now, back to Scott Peterson. Why are the people that are legal analysts always prosecutors? Much like when we talk about war, why are the people that always talk about war ex-generals? Like they have some sort of insider information. These guys are already on the boards of places like Raytheon, and they're collecting a huge check to come on and just blow some smoke up your butt about things they don't know.
I think what's more interesting, I mean, this is all interesting to me, but I think what's more interesting that I've been on is the alternative media, in quotation marks, isn't a lot. In fact, I would actually say it's worse. One thing that and the reason why it's worse is not because of the tactics. The tactics are the same. It's that the pretense, if you go back and watch early news and this news and entertainment, they knew it and they presented it as such initially. Now it gets more murky when you get into the 90s and you start seeing these major newscaster broadcast networks having clear political biases. People think that was for politic reasons, and it is, but it's also because clear political biases creates a predictable market that you don't have to personalize, but you can try to control by offering a coherent worldview to them as a kind of immersion. Now, social media does that now. It moved from personalization to immersion. So it moves from trying to deduce what you want from your personal choices to trying to direct what you want through a limited profile. This is true on TikTok. This is true on Amazon. Like if you look at Amazon predictive algorithms, for example, you would get even as much as 6 years ago, you'd actually get pretty good predictions from them. Now you literally get the same shit that they would throw on, a bestseller list. It's now gotten back to that. And you ask yourself why it is. Well, the audience that you control that way also is weirdly more loyal. You don't have to personalize to them. It's just easy to sell. Um, but with say left media, I know people know that I've like picked on people like Ryan Grimm. But it's actually basically the truth right now that one, people can't tell the editorial page from the news page. I can't tell you how many smart people send me editorials as news, and I'm like, if it's an editorial, it has no fact standards. It doesn't have to get like even by newsroom standards. It doesn't have to. You don't have to vet anything.
Yeah.
Um.
Thomas Friedman. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But just in general, like you just see that increasingly across the board as like an editorial shared as news. Um always been a problem. I think we just didn't know how much it was a problem until social media aggregated in a way that we could see. Um, one of the things that I like to say about social media is it removes our ability to say no one is dumb enough to believe that, because you can always find someone to believe anything.
Perfect example. Someone sent me a video of the woman that filed the lawsuit against the Wachowski brothers and Fox, I think, over the Matrix and Terminator. She claimed that they had a contest for a script, and she wrote a script in like 86
Mhm.
or so. Terminator was done in 82, so there's no way in the world her 86 script could have influenced Terminator. And her whole thing was, well, when I wrote this thing, John Connor is Jesus Christ and he's Neo's dad, and this is supposed to take place. And it was a bunch of bullshit. And the lawsuit, the woman did file a lawsuit, and the lawsuit was dismissed.
Mhm.
Um, she filed another one and got a settlement for something, and I forget what that lawsuit was for. If you look it up, you can find out. There's been actually extensive work in finding out, who did what and who wrote what. But the comments in this, so it's an Instagram video, and I'm looking at it, and the comments are like, this is the truth, this is the truth. And one person wrote, none of this is true. She never wrote this. And I responded, yeah, she didn't write it. It doesn't take long to look and see that there's multiple, fact check sites, deal with fact check sites as you will. But there was a few news articles when it happened. And the origin of the story is that someone said she filed a lawsuit and she was going to get the biggest settlement in history, and none of it was true. And that story comes out in 2004. So that's when you get all these articles about it, and it's just reprints, to your point, Derick, of the same false news.
Mhm.
Um, and if I want to Google, did this woman write The Matrix and Terminator, I can find 100 articles, all based off the same false article that says, yes, she did.
Yeah, this isn't new, by the way. Like there's all kinds of false stuff from the early 20th and 19th century that was repeated in the same way. Uh, I listened to a show about about mistakes in history, and like there's so many that even the guy who's doing the show is like, well, the contemporary resources are actually just pulled back to one article and they're just repeating it, and you'll find in like some diary somewhere that someone's archived but is now public that, oh well, this never happened, but it's been repeated as fact for like a century, so it's not new. The difference, however, is the scale and the quickness of it. You will notice that a lot of this kind of stuff is reportings from the 80s and 90s, from the late 90s and early aughts, that go viral because that's when your internet stuff is really beginning to have mass penetration in society. Yes, the internet goes all the way back to the 70s, but like I remember even when I was in school, we would talk about using the internet in class, and we're like, yeah, but 50% of our students don't have it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and this was in the aughts. So I think people like, also a lot of kids now like think that our internet environment and its ubiquity, and like the fact that you can even be in like Africa and have a smartphone, which by the way, most internet access is from a smartphone because the actual physical infrastructure on the internet in a lot of Africa's shit, except on the phone lines, because it's on because there's other reasons to develop it. Um, neither here nor there, just lived experience there. But I find it interesting because you just have this acceleration of this. Well, I always joke that a lot of journalism now, particularly now that newsrooms can't possibly break news fast enough and have any standards. So increasingly news, you log onto a news site and what do you get if it's not a paid site?
Yeah.
Well, you either get conspiracy theories or you get real stuff, but it's literally aggregations of stories. It's like some some Ivy League graduate journalist who's probably an intern right now wrote a paragraph and then did a tweet search and put all the tweets on there, and all the paragraph does is narrative frame the tweets for you. So you have some kind of parasocial relationship or political relationship to how we're supposed to understand these tweets. And I joke about this as tweet stenography, but a friend of mine pushed back and it was like, well, it's narrative control. And I'm like, absolutely, you're right. But it's really interesting. It's very, very basic narrative control.
Hmm.
Um, because all it is like, I'm going to give you a framework that I'm just going to like news clip a 5-minute shirts they did on Twitter. I got to
Yeah.
crack out 14 of these. And and I'm also from Yale, and I'm gonna point this out. News facilities have gotten more and more elite, but as they become more and more elite, they have less and less people with like local ties and abilities to like fact check shit. So like even though you have people with more and more people with Ivy League degrees who come from money, and they had to come from money because they couldn't have done the internships to get the jobs without it. Um, they don't have the kind of skills to do anything but worry about elite access that other journalists who didn't have that kind of education had to have to keep their jobs on a local beat that doesn't exist anymore.
And do you remember a few years back, maybe God, maybe it's been like 10 years now, where and it happened in my area in the Bay Area news, sadly. There was a plane crash, a Korean plane crashed, and the newswoman who again is just reading the news, is reading the names, and you can see in her eyes when she realizes that the names she's reading aren't correct. Because
Yeah,
she's like,
they're basically a racist. I remember this. It was like a
yeah,
racist joke. I
something
think,
Wong, holy fook. And when she says that, when she goes, like you see her eyes get big, like this, oh shit, right? Like,
mm,
how does that slip through? There's a lot of different stories that came out about that story, but somebody was trying to pull an anchor man and screw someone over. But that happened so quickly. And again, I think it's just the way we digest news. We need things now so quickly that investigative journalism, we're kind of divorced from that idea. So if someone says they're an investigative journalist, like the parasocial relationship between people that other people think are quote unquote lefties because maybe they've broken a story about a right wing leader, or they've broken a story that's helped um, bring something to light where a left wing leader gets freed. These people aren't necessarily um, socialist Marxist figures. They're just reporters trying to get a story.
right. I,
And
as
go
a
ahead.
as a side note, to even add to that, a lot of those people now tried to work in the private sector, and there were no jobs for them anymore in investigative journalism, and they now worked for state outlets. The reason why they work for state outlets is even though state outlets tend to have a bias, and I could all of them do. It's not just
Mhm,
the nefarious ones.
mhm.
And sometimes the bias of those journalistic enterprises is actually interesting because it's different internal to a country and external to a country. So, for example, if you were to read Al Jazeera English versus Al Jazeera Arabic, it's a completely different
Yeah.
newspaper. Um, but so those things are there, right? I mean, I know a lot of people. I know some people personally who like worked for RT because they were trying to go into legit journalism. They probably did some legit journalism for RT, but now
Mhm.
everybody has to get a state outlet job, and I'm actually going to say this: ours aren't much better. Like NPR, like is sometimes like woke Norfolk Grumman advertisements. Like, I mean, I literally listened one day and there's an ad for Raytheon. What is Raytheon domestically advertising for? I mean, it wasn't an ad, it was a sponsorship, but it was there. And then, and I was like, whoa, we're gotten that blatant now. And then it was like 15 ways to talk to your granddad about pronouns. And I was like, what? And it was talking about some military exercise. It was like really favoring aggression in Afghanistan. I remember this is like right after, and I'm just like, wow, like this is kind of blatant propaganda. Another example that's less blatant than that, but I definitely experienced. My ex and I lived in Korea together during one of the big flare-ups with the North when Kim Jong Il died and Kim Jong Un took over. And we were hearing all this stuff out of NPR about how everyone in Seoul was terrified, and we were like, we haven't seen any of that. Like, now maybe it was our own selection bias, but like I spoke Korean. I knew like 2 old dudes who really were worried about it. Now there have been times that I have been in Korea prior to like 2 years before that where they really were scared, but that wasn't on the US news nearly as much. That was the Yongpan Island incident. And I was like, holy shit, like this is reporting stuff all kinds of distorted. I mean, it wasn't lying, right? But it was just like it found the one weirdo who was like really, really upset. Another example, and this is not NPR, this is Democracy Now. The way Democracy Now covered the Arab Spring in Egypt was irresponsible. All right. The only people they talked to on their multiple reports, and I watched, were people who spoke English at the protest. Now, I'm not, I hope my listeners understand that, like, people who speak English at a protest in Egypt are educated in the same kind of liberal educational establishment that, like, elite people in America are educated. Like, for example, when Trump was elected, he in Egypt, my students who are all in this liberal educated environment all hated him, but the average person on the street in Egypt was really pro-Trump until he recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Because not even because they were particularly like Trump, but the average Egyptian saw Obama as a traitor who played both sides during the revolution, during the Arab Spring, and didn't was totally inconsistent. And they were like, well, at least with Trump, we know what we're getting, and he's a straight talker.
Interesting. I've heard that in the States as well from black people.
So if you took like the average student I was taking, if you listened to them, you would have thought that the average Egyptian hated Trump. But if you looked at opinion polls or you read in Arabic, the opposite was true.
But there was a narrative, though, with Trump that the media was trying to put out there. So back to your not original, but back to one of the things you're saying that I think is so important when we talk about this is it's not that it's a lie, right? These things happen. There are people that are racist hillbillies that like Donald Trump, but that's not the only people that like Donald Trump. If you showed a room full of conservative Latinos that were pro-Trump and pro-wall, it would kind of fuck up the narrative right there about this kind of white versus black thing. Even the way the news is trying to handle this young man that got murdered by police in Memphis felt really hard for them to handle because they're like, we really have a way that we do this, and this is effing it up. How do we present this? The race kept getting presented so much. When it happened, Ben looks over, he's like, dude, he goes, Jason, I never thought I'd see this. And it was like young, unarmed black man beaten to death, by black cops, news at 11.
And yeah, the funny thing is that's actually the Maryland riots, the second wave of the original BLM riots, was actually
Pretty great.
involved.
There's black cops that
It
did,
was
yeah.
black cops.
They
Like
were
it,
involved in that thing. And no, but again, it's the whole like there's a narrative that they need to incite people's anger, and that's the easiest best one is the race one, and then the second best one is, can we get middle class insecurity shaken up?
Yeah.
Because nothing scares people more than the shakeup of middle class insecurity. You don't believe me? Why do you think Poltergeist was so successful? Why do you think Back to the Future is so successful? Back to the Future is about protecting middle class security. Marty McFly has to make sure his parents fuck, so Hill Valley's is a pretty place.
So interestingly, I've been thinking a lot about this lately in political trends that people can't predict. You know, one of the things that's happened since the reckoning on January 6th, the reckoning about January 6th, is there's been a lot of honesty in the media, but on like page 15 about who they were, which is they weren't mostly either working class or petite bourgeois. They were all of them, but they were all downwardly mobile. Most of them are from blue or purple states, not from red states. Most of them are from suburbia or ex-urban areas, which is utterly predictable. And I can tell you why. All right. The two things that are under discussed in America: where's the worst crime? Red states. Actually, the worst crime is in deindustrialized cities, which mostly are in the Midwest, which mostly now,
Tulare County, yeah,
right, which are mostly now red states. Although you see them, if we want to talk about this in California's
you were on the
context,
show that day we talked about it, right? The crime in these, yeah.
But I've been studying this for a long time because my home city is one of these cities. Like even in the 90s, we had one of the highest murder rates per capita in the nation, but it was never reported on because it's a small deindustrialized city. Used to be a paper mill, used to be a tobacco factory. Those things closed in by the mid 90s. They were all gone. And even now it's funny when I mentioned that I'm from a mill town, everyone assumes that I'm like from Pennsylvania or some shit. And I'm like, no, it's all over the country, dude. Like, but it breaks people's narrative right now. There's two things about contemporary voting trends break people's narratives. The most radical people, you and I've talked about this, the conservatives I meet in California and Orange County are out in the Modesto Valley as opposed to the Bay, are way the fuck nuttier than the ones that I meet even here in Mormonlandia,
dude,
where there are like Ammon Bundy people, but like still you don't see, like you go on a dating app, even one that's not super liberal like OKC, you just go on it. And the fact that we have liberal and conservative dating apps is in and of itself fucking weird. But like Tinder, which is neutral, I see way crazier shit when you're pulling out of Orange County than I do when we're looking at stuff here in like even in Provo, which is a very red area.
Brother, I'm on these things. Don't say that with any sort of pride. And not that the people I meet suck or anything. It's just the things that I see. A lot of "Let's Go Brandon" in people's dating profiles. A lot of, if you're wearing a mask, don't bother swiping right or whatever. What else is there that I see a lot of? The new thing I see a lot of is "I want a real man." You know, it's almost like Jordan Peterson speaking. There is one person, I might have even a screenshot. It's like they were like, "I believe Jordan Peterson is a woman." She's like, "I believe Jordan Peterson is the gift from God," or some shit like that. You know, and on the flip side, there was another person that was like, "Oh, my dream is like," you know, they have questions on one of these, like, you know, and you can ask a question and give an answer, so it can start a conversation. And one of it was like, "What's your dream dinner date?" And this person said Michelle Obama, and that was like big thing on her profile. It's like,
yeah, I was interesting. I would probably say out here the signaling is in the other direction, where if someone's going to signal, they're going to signal way, 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 way left. Like because normies here are normies. They're center rightist or at most center liberals. I think LDS are a little weird on the political spectrum. Actually, they tend to be very Republican, but they don't like Trumpism very much as a general rule. So
Well,
it's
look at there was a lot of Christians that also felt really, triggered by Trump because he didn't espouse their values. He couldn't even pretend it, and they didn't like him before he was even running for office.
what's
So,
interesting though is evangelical support for Trump is higher than any other president, even ones who did
well,
share their
that's like
values.
saying fringe Christian support for Trump is higher than it has been in some time, right?
Well, that's
The fringe element.
if we're honest, if you're a church going Christian, I know this is going to be unpopular to say, not amongst our crowd, but if I was talking to the general public,
Mhm,
outside of Utah or outside of a Catholic community,
mhm,
you're a fringe person. Because while only 25% of the population espouses no religion, which is way up, by the way,
mhm,
the average Christian, 75%
mhm.
of them don't go to church more than once a year. So, like,
I would
I got
push
stats
back
that
on
back that up.
I would push
Like,
back on that and say those stats are cute and wonderful, and that's adorable that you have that, and we'll put it on the refrigerator like some macaroni art. But as someone that actually lived with a family that went to a mild mega church, and
when
there's a
though?
kind of interesting little documentary on a New York City
Hmm.
mega church and the fuckery that was going on in there. I think there's 300 million people in this country, and we don't really have that good of a finger on what a third of them are really doing. And
I would
churches aren't going the way it doesn't look like the UK in the States, right? Where those churches are big and fucking empty. But these mega churches, they're not all in Macon.
no, but actually interesting right now is there's too many mega churches in Macon and they are empty. Um, I'm serious about that.
I believe.
Uh,
I mean, if there's too
uh,
many, there's too many. Right?
but I think that's interesting. Like, I think my pushback to you is that's actually a sign of secularization that these small community churches can't be maintained and they have to be consolidated like that. Um, that said, just to put it back in perspective, though, when people tell me the DSA is large and we're talking about at absolute most 100,000 people,
You
that
can't fill up
is
a football stadium.
right. And then I'm like, even when we're talking about like only 1 in 4 Christians actually go to church once a year, you're still talking about probably 20 million people. Like,
It's
because Christians are still nominal Christians are still 75% of that 300 million. So if you're even down to, I think people just don't get the scale of this, like at
I
all.
mean, the Hallmark Channel still exists, and those movies are all Christian themed. You know what I mean?
Right. Well,
Tyler Perry's carved out a nice little industry where, I brought this up on Brianna's. I was a guest on Brianna Joy Gray's show, and she was talking about there's only light skinned actresses in Hollywood, and I was like, that's not true. Like, she's well, they're the only
we're gonna
ones that
watch
get
Christian
roles. I was like,
shit.
that's not true. Like the last two black women that I know won Oscars were pretty dark. If you want to talk crap about the roles they get, that's a different question or different topic. But I was like, if you want to see black women in movies doing shit that
Who aren't
isn't just playing a
Nigerian.
mate, just there's a whole industry, a whole cottage industry of just black film. And it's not all Christian. There's horror movies, there's thrillers, there's action movies. You may not like them, but if your point is you want to see, more dark skinned actresses in white movies, then that's a different point to have. And that's not, there's nobody making movies or money. They're definitely making movies. People are definitely watching them.
I'll tell you a funny story since we're on this culture stuff before we even get to the politics. But I went to the Tubman movie with my then girlfriend, who I always bring up
How'd you
when we talk
like
about
it?
Peru. Oh, it was weird. It was a
Okay, I
weird
never watched
movie.
it. Yeah.
It tried to go on. So this is actually to your point. It
Mm.
tried to do it tried to minimize white saviorism, but that's kind of a problem when you're talking about the Underground Railroad because literally you can't talk about it without white people. It's just they were the people who maintained it. There was no way that black people could maintain their own Underground Railroad at that time period. But the other thing that it did is it tried to have it both ways on whether or not like the religious parts of Harriet Tubman were true. But I'll tell you what I remembered by going to this because it was the weirdest experience. This movie was marketed and you go in and you see all the fucking what I like to call the NPR Oscar bait movies, right? But it was also Tyler Perry movies and shit. And I'm like, oh yeah, since I moved out of the South, I forgot these exist. Like, because when I lived in the South, you saw them all the time. Like, they were just around.
Yeah.
But like, I'm in Utah now. Like, most of the black people here are from Nigeria or Somalia or Ethiopia. I'm serious about that. And like, then there's a few like transplants and converts and shit who live around here. People come in from Texas for work, but so there's kind of like there's actually like a weird tension between immigrant black people here and like African Americans. And I have to be
some ADOS tension.
Yeah, there's some slight ADOS tension. Although I would not say most of the black people here are professionals of a class that would actually forbid ADOS from being an acceptable part of their discourse, but there's still the tension still there. My point about this though is I'm like sitting here and I'm like, this movie is this weird intersection where it knows it's playing to the NPR middle brow liberal crowd who didn't like it, by the way, and also to like the black movie crowd. And it was weird because I'm like, I never see these ads together. Like, and because of where I live now, I don't ever see these ads here anyway, because there's just not a large enough black community for it to be viable. So it was very interesting to be reminded that this whole alternate entertainment industry still exists. It's just not part, even now, even after the diversification of mainstream media, at least for a few years after the Floyd uprisings, there's still kind of a niche, like almost straight to video black entertainment industry that is totally separated.
It is and it isn't, right? Because think about, people are like, oh, that's just one thing. And I brought this up today. I was like, what saves Marvel is Blade, which go rewatch it. It's a black movie.
Yeah, it actually is interesting how long it took white executives. I'm not normally big on the cultural racism arguments, but this one I think is real. Where I'm like, there's all kinds of stuff in the 90s where you guys prove that white people will watch black people.
Yep.
But black people will really come out for any time you show them in media at all in any positive light.
And Black Panther really breaks through, and the sequel gives you another movie that's similar where there's black women, dark-skinned black women in Woman King. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, right after it. Yeah.
And these movies do extremely well. Ask yourself how many kids knocked on your door dressed like T'Challa.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's and what I point out to people about that is that can't just be for black people because they're only 15% of the population.
It's still, and when I brought that up, I got, of course I got pushback. I was like, it's silly to think that, if you don't, we live in a moment, we were just talking about the internet, and people forget that discussion when it gets into this. We live in a moment that your Netflix, Derick, that says these are the top 10 movies. Those are not the top 10 movies. Those are Derick's top 10 movies.
Right, yes.
My top 10 is going to look very different. My echo chamber is going to look different than your echo chamber. So if all I do, me and Pascal were joking about this. Pascal said he gave his Netflix code out to his cousin and he turned on Netflix. He said, all these damn black ass movies. But it's going to be what you put into it. And if all you want to see is a certain type of film, you're going to get it. Right?
Although I think my point would go back to the beginning with TikTok, because I've seen this. I played with this, actually. I have 3 TikTok profiles. Okay. TikTok looks at your face, by the way, so it like tries to guess you based off of biometric scans. I am, as your many comments about Sean King indicate, ethnically ambiguous under most profiles. Yes, I am as pale as the snow. But my features could be Latin, they could be Northern European, they could be Arab.
And as someone that knows Derick Varn in real life, I will say the camera adds 10 ethnicities.
Yeah, it does. I look a lot whiter in person. particularly when I'm meeting you in a kilt.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting because like I think I look like Nathan Lane, not Sean King, but I somehow look like both.
You know, real life, again, Derick in real life, real different cat. On the screen, you know, he's over here looking like Patrice Lumumba on the screen.
Yeah, actually, I have actually like thought about how I kind of do look like Patrice Lumumba, but just to point that out though, even when I've been traveling abroad, I've been mistaken for other ethnicities. Usually not black. That's new, but
It's just us.
I know. But although my girlfriend gets comments about how I look like Sean King from people out here too. So it's like, oh god, it's not just M. Truson and Jason on this kick. There must something be there.
Well, it'd be funny if cops straightened up when you walked around. Put the baton away. Put the baton away.
But I am ethnically ambiguous enough that they can't figure me out on the app. And I'm sure this is true actually for a lot of people. So what happens? Well, I have them where I've just liked different things. So like something black would come up and I'd like it. Now I like on my Instagram, there's a lot of stuff I get stuff from everywhere. Facebook thinks I'm Latino because I lived in Mexico and speak Spanish. Like I've actually looked. It thinks that and so like my Facebook feeds now are like half from Mexico. And I started playing with this, and I learned that like once they build that profile of you, they start basically racially stereotyping your likes immediately. And so I have 3 different TikTok profiles, and a black developer friend of mine, she actually told me to try this because she works in the back end. She told me this would happen. So I was surprised that she was right, because she also has like me as a Latin person, me as Asian, because except for the palest of pale faces, the algorithm is actually not particularly good. So what happens? Well, I get like more. It goes from me liking some black creators to more and more stereotypically black in one profile on TikTok. And another one, I get more and more stuff in Spanish. And then in another one, I get more and more stuff about Utah. And it's weird because like it's got the same ISPN number, but this is like they're building a racial profile. Some of it is based off what you put into it. But some of it is just immersive predictive stuff. So there's a feedback loop where they hope to get you sucked in, and they can just feed you like, well, this is what black entertainment looks like. And you're probably absolutely correct. Not probably. I haven't done it with Netflix. So I don't know. That I could probably, if I tried to give it a few things, get black Netflix versus and I'm sure, in fact, I know that my partner and I, like, we have a lot of the same tastes, but she gets different stuff because she likes a couple of female things and a couple of things that you would consider middle brow. And I will sometimes even get the same stuff, but it'll get different pictures and shit linked to it.
My goal is to always make it so confused that it just explodes, and it hasn't happened yet because my tastes are so across the board. And I went down a rabbit hole of, some months ago of like just Asian cinema that wasn't necessarily like horror. Some of those movies are really good. I remember seeing In the Realm of the Senses on tour.
That's a great movie.
And I was like, whoa, like opened up a whole door of all this other cool stuff. But I also watch a ton of crappy, late 80s action movies. Like I've watched, Death Wish 4, The Crackdown 7 times.
You probably keep like New Moon Pictures alive.
I am trying to single-handedly keep New Moon, and I want Canon to come back.
Yeah, Canon.
And make more wonderful films, and also Malibu Bay, which makes all the Andy Sedaris movies like A Hard Ticket to Hawaii and,
Oh
and
God.
stuff like that, and Savage Beach. But I definitely want to see the algorithm blow up. Trying to watch as much goofy shit as possible. Me and Ben we started watching Nightmare on Elm Street because we were trying to figure out which one had the pizza scene where Freddy's eating the faces off the pizza like pepperoni, and we didn't remember which one that was. So we're like, oh, let's just watch it. I think it's 4, and I think we were wrong. And we watched 4, like, oh, let's watch 5. And like, okay, well, I guess we'll go in reverse order, some weird order, and we'll go back around, and we'll end on 3. And he looks at me because I've been shoehorning in these other 80s movies at the same time for him to watch. And he goes, Jason, I have to admit, I'll watch some of these movies with you, but I would never, ever on my own think to watch any of the shit.
So this is something that you and I share, is a love of both really high culture foreign films and also like the shittiest movies.
Shittiest.
Like if it's made from Italy or Israel, like on like $5, and like there is no original language version because it's ADR'd even in its native language.
Dude,
like that's the kind of movie we watch.
Bruno Mattei directed it.
Yes. Oh God. Yeah.
I'm in.
I mean,
JG is kind of similar to that too. JG Michael is similar to that shit.
Oh yeah, JG and I used to we wanted to one time for Zero Magazine do a show just on like high-low art, like we would talk about Fellini and then we go talk about Fulci. Like it'd be like, okay, now I know, like, can we go from like the highest of Italian cinema to the absolute
just
shittiest,
torture.
yeah, misogynistic eye torture all day long.
I don't know why, dude, Derick. I don't know why I can watch Ninja 3: The Domination as many times as I can, but I've been talking like every month I'll send JG a message like, dude, I want to do a shitty movie podcast with you, and he's like, dude, motherfucker, let's do it. And then I'll talk to you, dude, let's do a shitty movie fucking podcast, and let's fucking do it. And life always kicks us in the testicles, we never get around to doing it. But as we're wasting people's time on air to having this production call,
that's okay.
Keep an eye out for me convincing Derick, probably when his summer break starts, because I want to do it where we're literally watching the film.
So let's to get to, we haven't talked about the Trump stuff, but I actually think even though it doesn't immediately seem relevant, and I think it is relevant to your left as a lifestyle brand and your whole kayfabe argument, we've basically been on the basics of the kayfabe argument. But I think interestingly, the left as a lifestyle brand goes back to the end of the New Left. Like the New Left actually did interrogate this in the mid 60s. It really did. Like it was like, okay, well, we have all these personal crises. Why are we having them? What's the social conditions? Like, why is psychoanalysis moving from this social thing to this pharmaceutical thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And after the 60s is over, and you got like, what is it? Who is like you got like Bobby Seale with the Black Liberation Army, then like doing like regular ads, and like you got like Abby. I was just reading Flash's book again, Culture Narcissism Slash. He was talking about Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman, what they were doing in the 70s, which was like going off to yoga retreats and discovering what it was like to be their real selves in their 30s.
Can we admit to something though, Derick? And we touched on this briefly when we did the Woodstock show. Please go back and watch that on Varn Vlog. Which is, there is a libertarian streak. There's a narcissistic streak in the hippies.
Oh yeah. It's even the funny thing is the New Left and the hippies weren't the same thing until way later. Like we equate them now. Like
But the hippies got to be adjacent to a lot of movements. And I was reading this when I was doing the research for the Woodstock piece.
Mm-hmm.
The hippies got to be adjacent to Black Power. They got to be adjacent to women's liberation. They got to be adjacent to the AIM movement. They got to be adjacent to Chicano rights. They got to be adjacent to a lot of things. And they got to, it's almost like Grandpa in the Boondocks. Were you really there with the dogs and the fire hoses, or did you say you were there with the dogs and the fire hoses? There was only a small amount of people that was actually there, but all these people from your generation say they were a part of these movements. And one thing we don't really talk about that much, and I'm starting to see a few more people talk about it now, which is, and I'm sure there's some academic papers on it, is hippies and the cults. Jim Jones comes out of a bunch of those are hippies and New Left people because Jim Jones is proclaiming to be a socialist. Manson, we could go on and on about all of the culty movements that come out of hippies. And I think it has a lot to do with inward thinking, being all about the self, and communal thinking is a dead scene. Like, back to what we were saying about boomers, that's for your dad, man. Anyone over 30 is I don't listen to anyone over 30 because they don't understand. And I do find that fascinating that no one really likes to interrogate that why this movement, there's so many people are still trying to emulate, from Black Power to the Weathermen. A lot of it was self-centered.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's one of the things people miss about Black Power. Black Power is the movement from the civil rights movement into a split between the more liberal civil rights movement, which actually isn't represented by MLK at the time, but is in retrospect, and people like Stokely Carmichael, who become more and more into Pan-Africanism and like Black nationalism, and pick back up like the Black Belt thesis from the 30s. And they were never truly separated until the end of the 60s, but you see that, right? But what happens is, like, from Harold Cruz, I'm about to say Harry Cruz, that's a Southern author, different guy. From Harold Cruz forward, you start seeing this focus on Black cultural nationalism. It gets tied into the Black Power movement. Mm-hmm. And it's all about, like, creating Black arts, creating a Black intellectia, accumulating a Black, what Pascal would call PMC, mm-hmm. To create a collective identity for Blackness in America. And then in the case of, like, people attached to Carmichael, in Africa too. Mm-hmm. And that gets turned from that. And I don't mean to feminize this as an insult on women, but into Toni Morrison and Alice Walker. Now, I think Toni Morrison is an amazing author. I think mm-hmm. Alice Walker's first book of short stories is good, and we just don't talk about the rest of it. But there is this shift, and you can even see it in the literature, from, like, the collective Black nationhood into Pan-African identity into personal roots discoveries. I mean, you even see it in, like, Alex Haley, right? Like, so maybe we shouldn't pick on Alex.
Who's somewhat Walker. Conservative, right?
Yeah, he was a Nixonite. He was a Nixonite. Like, so
don't tell that to anyone that's read the autobiography. They'll tell you that was the book that gave them their revolutionary awakening. But which is ultimately, like, the most ultimate pull up your pants story. It's fascinating because what really pushed me over the edge to write both pieces, because they were both going to be part of one thing, and Jean Bajlan was one that told me to break it up, was reading Bayard Rustin's essays towards the end of his life, where he was kind of sending messages out to socialist movements, what not to fall victim to, and kind of, what are we following here with this Panther Party? And there's only like a few thousand of them, and of that dues paying members, and of that 1,000, how many of them are cops? when you have 500,000 dues paying members of the NAACP, who do you think has more power and even political sway? And that doesn't become part of the discussion. And now here we are in 2023 with people still stuck posturing like it's 1972.
Yeah, I mean,
Divorced from any ideas of power. I think you may disagree.
No, I think you're right. I think even more, what I think is even more interesting about this when we talk about leftism as a lifestyle brand, like, okay, one of the things I keep on pointing out, even now that we moved on from police abolition and all that, and I know people say we haven't moved on from it, but the left, the former left, the DSA left, etc., has more or less just shut up about it. It's also shut up about a lot of other issues, but it's just gotten really quiet about it, right? Because it realizes it's not a winning platform, that they don't really have a solution to a lot of problems, and that their arguments were this weird amalgamation, actually, of not like traditionally socialist arguments, but a little bit of anarchism and a little bit of progressivism at the same time. So, like, this faith in the administrative state as if it could be separated from the violence into the state, and this kind of view that, you know, cops are bad. And like, look, I also think cops are bad. I've actually talked about this. I'm a prison abolitionist, and I don't think the current iteration of policing is redeemable. All that said, however, when we are honest, a lot of what I want still looks like policing.
Well, let's go back to true crime real quick. Let's go back to true crime. And I don't, we're going over an hour.
Go ahead.
I don't want to take too much of your time. When you think about the Night Stalker, there's a great 4-part series on Netflix about the Night Stalker, and in that 4-part series about the Night Stalker, I was watching that with a woman that I was seeing at the time, and she worked in the legal world. And there's a part where we both go, "That's insane that no one notices this." To catch the Night Stalker, it wasn't crack police work, and first of all, he gets caught by citizens, but to even know who Richard Ramirez was, a cop beat up his cousin. Says it on the thing. Not a big deal, apparently. If you look at the Central Park 5, when they see us, that Ava DuVernay produces, horrible travesty would happen to those young men. But the people that made sure they were in jail, Linda Fairstein, the DA, and I forget the name of the investigator at the time. Before that, they got the preppy murderer. Like, I think the year before that, or maybe even a few months before that, they killed a woman in Central Park. They used the same tactics on him that they used on these 14-year-old boys. I think he might have been 19 or 20 at the time. I do think there's a huge difference between 19 and 14. I'm bringing this up because these are different questions we're not asking ourselves, which is, are we okay with excessive force when the bad guy's caught? Because excessive force you find the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, really did do some horrible, not just murder all those people and raped a few on the way out. He also molested like 40 kids. Raped like 40 kids, right? Bad guy. Does it justify? And I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm posing this question that is very uncomfortable. Because how do you want to go into, people are going to throw out statistics, well, police don't solve this. I get it. But how do you want to, there's still bad guys. They exist.
Right.
I don't believe in that whole, well, every person that commits a crime is just a victim of capitalism. And if they had this, that, and the third, then they wouldn't be convicted doing these crimes. It's like, well, what was Mark Zuckerberg's problem? He's kind of a horrible person. What's Jeff Bezos's problem? He's kind of a horrible person.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of horrible people. Do you think that that's the only reason why? Sometimes people can just be that way for a plethora of reasons.
So my response to that is always interesting, because on one hand, yes, relative inequality is a good predictor of social violence. On another hand, even a place like South Korea. Now, South Korea actually, this is interesting because South Korea is a capitalist hellscape, but it is also low crime. It's very low crime. You can leave, you can leave your phone on the sidewalk and it not be touched, kind of low crime. And so when people go, well, culture doesn't matter, and I'm like, well, yeah, it kind of does. I mean, like, what's incentivizing the culture, and that's all economic and political. We can't really separate that. And there's mitigating factors in Korea, a bunch of them. However, there was still a serial killer in Korea, and there's been a couple of very brutal murders that were unmotivated. And in fact, they were more unable to deal with it than you'd expect because their police don't deal with it that often. So, like, functional society, relatively low crime. When crime does happen, however, it's still a big goddamn deal. And in those cases, it is often hard to say that it's just sociological prompting. And so I point that out because it's one of these things where I'm like, yeah, I think like 90% of the kind of crime we deal with would go away because most of it isn't just bad dudes. If we talk about most murders, it's men killing men, usually in organized crime violence or semi-organized crime violence, like the drug trade. Like, yes, that's
Sure.
a great majority of it.
Sure, I'll give you that. Yeah, sure.
But
Mhm.
random fucking violence does happen. It's rare. And what's interesting about this, however, is when social conditions are really chaotic, it increases. Like,
Oh, we're seeing it. We saw it in Oakland with the young woman that got murdered, and you know, I did a plea on the show, like, please don't try to politicize this woman's death and use it as a soapbox or as a way to kind of point out some sort of contradiction in abolitionist thinking.
Like Fox News has done. But we do have
Have they been? Thank God.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it.
they have been.
Oh,
but we also have to be honest. Like, if we always cede these cases to them because we're afraid to touch it because it hurts our politics, we lose on them. I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, we had the first recorded trans person in a bathroom rape story. You know, the mystical thing that TERFs always bring up. Now, here's the funny thing.
Okay.
It wasn't actually that. This was a young boy who was wearing either a skirt or a kilt, but did not identify as trans.
As a woman. Okay.
At all. As non-binary or as a woman. But the school board brought it up to protect them from investigation because he was wearing a kilt. and of course the right-wing media seized on this. Interesting, the only people who corrected the right-wing media's report was Jesse Singal. All right.
Okay.
Who most people on the left consider a transphobe. And I don't say this because to praise Jesse Singal. I say this because we couldn't even answer the story because we didn't want to touch it under the premise that it might be true.
Well, this goes back to what I was originally writing about. Like, if your politics have to be hashtagged for people to understand them, for you to understand them, then
you don't have a politics.
You don't really have politics. And I feel that way especially when it comes to crime, because it's an uncomfortable thing for people to talk about. If you're far away from crime, you can always have a moral, well, if they just had better conditions, they wouldn't do these things. It's like, well, that's not necessarily true, because I've lived in better areas. Wives still got hit, you know, cars still got broken into, and it wasn't because it was from people from down the hill. You know, I know I'm sure you know kids with money that like to check door handles and steal shit just because they want to steal shit.
Yeah, that does happen. Yeah.
You know, so.
Also, can we admit that young teenagers are barbarians and have to be checked? Like
Again, nobody likes to admit the sad realities of this shit because it doesn't fit well in with an easy narrative of we can fix all this if we can make these other things go away. And that to me seems somewhat silly because you're almost ignoring the people that have to live in it. And it reminds me of the first Mad Max movie, the very first Australian one, where it doesn't look all dystopian. And there's a scene where he's having a difficulty with his job, because if you watch that movie, the cops and the criminals are just fucking this city up, right? They're just,
Mm-hmm.
they don't give a shit about pedestrians. And Mel Gibson's character goes, I think the only thing that's the difference between me and the roving hordes of criminals around here is my badge. And that doesn't make me feel, and I'm paraphrasing, and that doesn't make me feel really good about the job that I'm doing if that's the only thing that's separating me.
Mm-hmm.
His captain's like, well, let that shit go. You got a badge. Fuck it. We got to bust heads. And I think a lot of people live in that Mad Max world where there really is scary shit. And sometimes you need law enforcement to help you with the scary shit. But sometimes law enforcement can be the scary shit as well.
Yeah, I think about this when we talk about stuff like HR, all right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of people who hate cops will defend HR lately because HR's whole progressive rebranding in the last 10 years. And I've seen it. I've seen it. I thought this was like a conservative stereotype that wasn't real until it showed up around me in a very real way, where people were like, well, this, DI initiative is really important and we got to stop people from dead naming us because or whatever. And I actually pointed out, look, in my area, it's actually queer people who are afraid of some of the DEI proposals, like trying to get rid of non-discrimination clauses so we can positively discriminate, because the population of color of teachers is less than 1%. But you're going to give a whole lot of latitude for administrators to get rid of anybody for any reason, with the ability to bring up non-discrimination as an issue. So all of us people who are getting harassed by libs of TikTok are going to get fired, right? And I was like, that's the opposite narrative of what you have about HR. Well, HR is starting to function. I don't blame anyone. Not even to put it into our identity categories. I remember in the 90s sitting through various levels like sexual harassment training when I worked at Corporate Gibbs, some of which were helpful, others of which made me hate life.
Mm-hmm.
And going okay, I don't blame any woman for utilizing this if she feels harassed on the job.
Mm-hmm.
But it does have other effects, and you're not looking at those other effects when we talk about it just in the context of that specific instance. So too, I hate to tell these people, your relationship to the cops for a lot of poor people is actually the same way. Yes, I will admit, yes, people of color are less likely to call the cops. Poor white people are less likely to call the cops. They are less likely, but it is not Karens calling the cops in the hood or the trailer park. They're not there.
They won't come.
Right. They avoid the fuck out of that part of town. I
heard, oh man, I'd love to. I don't think I can tell this story. A friend of mine that works in services told me a crazy story, and I'm trying to find a way to paraphrase it. So I don't.
I'll give you a story while you try to figure this out.
Okay.
I worked with a bunch of woke teachers at a charter school. They were all great people. I really liked them. And they were all, in on the racial reckoning ahead of time, 2017, 2018, after the Charlottesville thing. They were doing all the stuff you're supposed to do, teaching a social justice curriculum in a state where it's illegal, etc. I invited them to my house. Mm-hmm. I live in a mostly brown part of the city. Mm-hmm. My neighbors are mostly Latin immigrants, or they're Chicano people, been here forever, or they're Polynesian. All right. Utah has the third lowest crime rate of any state in the country. My neighborhood, the white neighborhood across the tracks that's better, actually has a higher crime rate, right? But the same people who were doing all the anti-racist stuff, they lived up to the conservative stereotype here. They didn't want to come to my house because it was, quote, dangerous. And I'm like, really? Really? I lived in northern Mexico during the cartel war. You don't know what dangerous is, motherfucker. But two, the crime rates don't even justify what you're saying. This is just working class white and Latin, and it's 60% brown. And you don't want to come over here? This is not even in the South, where there's a socially enforced segregation from street to street where you are a little uncomfortable, just because you're not supposed to be there. Like,
Yeah.
and you know, from like the cops will ask you, why are you there? And they will assume you're buying drugs. Um, like, you know, it's kind of that's kind of gotten a lot better. But when I was growing up, that was definitely the case. And that's not the case out here. So I'm like, well, what's your problem? And I'm like, so there, like, that's this kind of stuff where I'm like, well, there is this weird thing where, like, and I got statistics to back this up. I know you sometimes doubt my statistics, but I do have statistics to back this up, that like people of, once you hit a middle class threshold, people think race is the bigger agitator. And also, implicit bias against race goes up.
I think it also has something to do with a bourgeois tendency to, you know, especially I'll speak to the what I believe about Black people, right? There's this bourgeois tendency to really try to double down on identity when you get to a certain level of status, and that then becomes your big problem, because you stop having the problems like, you know, I have. Like, I'm having legitimate problems trying to obtain my registration.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get pulled over because I'm gonna get fucked with. I don't have any warrants, and I don't have a lot of money, so you can fuck with me all day long. What am I gonna do? Get a public defender?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can just treat me like shit, and I have a very short fuse, and you know it might not be good for me. So my professional friends aren't worried about that because they don't have the same, you know, registration issues. You know, and it's been frustrating because I hate driving with fear, but you know that's a reality, that I know who I am in the world. I know where I sit in the world, and I know that I may not have the best interaction with law enforcement. Um, that being said, I also understand what it's like to live in an area where you dodge bullets. I can't call Luke Cage. I wish I could. Tony Stark's not coming to save me. And when I worked in an environment where you're dodging bullets and there's all kind of crazy activities going on inside, people want to call the police. There's a fear for a righteous fear for their safety. How do you want to reckon with that? And I haven't really heard too many great solutions. I've heard some interesting things that we would like to work, but I don't know too many mental health professionals that want to act like law enforcement.
No.
The city of LA right now, or the county of LA right now, is dealing with the problem of trying to hire mental health workers, giving people like huge vacation packages and here's a pension, and people are like, no, I'll make more money in the private sector and I don't have to deal with what I have to deal with in the public sector. It's just not worth it.
Well, I mean, how's that different than the idea? I'm going to get in trouble for this comparison. But when conservatives say give teachers guns,
You think
like,
I'm saying give teachers guns?
no. But I mean, like,
Oh,
how's the idea? I guess the idea is that these social workers aren't going to have guns, which that ain't going to happen.
I mean, if they look, the ones that I've dealt with don't, and they're all really, really young. So when you see like a 23-year-old kid trying to tell a 60-year-old person that's been homeless their whole life that they understand, it's just like, oh wow, this isn't gonna go well.
Right. Of course, but
yeah.
it's just like you're thinking about. We're not just talking about dealing with a homelessness problem. We're talking about dealing with all crime.
You
How
know,
are you going to deal with like the organized drug trade without a gun? Yes, a lot of this stuff. I guess this is where I would go. A lot of this stuff is prevented by social policy, but once it starts, it's hard to stop. I talk to social workers in places like Sweden, which has a higher murder problem than you'd think. In like these immigrant communities that are completely shut off and they're fed a lot of drugs. They can't become citizens because they're on worker programs, and then when they that often leads to like radical religious and political ideation, which is not surprising. and this social worker, a friend of mine, who's now a priest because he had to get out of it,
I believe it.
is Kurdish, so you can't accuse this of, like, he's serving his own community. And he's like, look, if we were to, even in a place that is relatively well off compared to the United States, if you're poor, Sweden, we have a lot of the same social problems, and it would take us 2 or 3 generations of things that leftists would not be comfortable with to even fix the things that are socially caused. All right. And there are feedback loops, and there are feedback loops in this that are worrying. I talked about all at the beginning with literacy. We all have our stuff going down. Well, here's what's happened when people's reading goes down. Okay. People don't model reading for their kids, and their kids are less literate than them. And we've actually seen real evidence that for the first time in the 40 years we've been studying this legitimately, general literacy went down, and this was before the pandemic, and it went down again massively after. And
I mean, you weren't the first teacher I heard say talk about or educator. I don't want to say teacher. As another one of your educator friends just walked into my door. The what they were getting from students, especially freshman students, as far as papers. And I remember it wasn't Andrew Hartman, but it was another mutual, I believe mutual professor friend of ours. He was like, I'm getting papers. Before I would get definitely a lot of high school level papers from my college freshman kids and even sophomores. But he's like, now I'm getting like barely freshman English style papers from my college kids. And they were blaming it on the Zoom learning.
This trend started before the Zoom learning. The Zoom learning has not helped, but it's not because of that. In general, the kids don't read. And college kids don't read. And if college kids are not reading, what do you think about high school kids?
And that goes back to the whole purpose of even, trying to write these things. And, you don't know if it's going to resonate. You hope it does. But if you don't have a certain literacy skill or even want to read, and now how many things do you see over the last 5-6 years have a time? Hey, it's only 5 minutes. This is only a 7-minute read. How are you deciphering media, and how are you ingesting media, and how are you ingesting information at this point? You're kind of wide open for ingesting media like sports talk. Even if you're not a sports fan, you're ingesting it like sports talk now. Who's the good guy? Who do I root for? What team am I on? And that's all I need to know. I mean, did you ever think in your lifetime you'd see this many people that say things like, well, Pol Pot didn't really kill all those people. Maybe it was a famine. He's a communist. Stalin,
he is a communist literally supported by the CIA, and this is public knowledge. But yeah, like a communist supported by the CIA to kill other communists. Yes, he was a communist, but like these people, you're right. I did not expect to see this. I did not expect people to deny things that are even recorded by socialist governments as facts.
And what happens, Derick, and I want to ask you this question seriously, what happens when American exceptionalism, and we talk about this a lot, especially with Bajlan, because this really chaps Bajlan's hide, and Kuba to a certain extent too. Well, fuck it, it's a show-wide thing, and you are the sometimes why of TIR. What happens when we invert American exceptionalism and it becomes America bad?
Well, I've actually said this for 10 years. I realized this when I was abroad, because I'm like, everyone in America, left and right, actually, because the right now has picked up America bad, but not our America. So it's just the other America, which happens to be most of it. So like, one thing I like to point out, maybe to your articles, is like a lot of people think this is just a left problem. It's not. But you do get this like America uniquely bad in the universe. And so that does lead to weird stuff, like regardless of what you actually think is going on in Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
Which I think, it's an unsupportable proxy war, and yet also Russia started it. Like, Russia started it for reasons that are prompted by the U.S. But if you think that's a legitimate reason to start an invasion, then you also probably should think about how that logic applied to the Iraq War, because neoconservatives made that argument back then. However, that said, most of the liberal left is now on Team Ukraine unquestionably, and now made that like a point where, like you pointed out, that well, maybe NATO does some fucked up, sketchy shit, and also, hey, some of Russia's grievances, even though this invasion is bullshit, were real. They start yelling at you as being some kind of post-left traitor, as we began the show on, right?
Yeah.
You can't hashtag these things or even talk about them in a coherent way, even if you lose left jargon. My favorite is revolutionary defeatism, which is this particular idea from the Zimmerwald left, where like you need your country to fail, but the other imperial power to also fail. And I'm like, that only happens in the context of a multi pole world war, like in World War I, where that did happen, where both Russia failed and Germany was defeated. But both things have to happen for that strategy to work. And I'm like, you just bringing that out in the context of Ukraine, how the hell, on what weird scenario does both Ukraine and Russia lose? Like,
but are these cats even getting that deep into it, or is it just show me what team I'm supposed to root for and I'll go from there?
Well, my thing is, these are the people who are getting out of show me which team I'm supposed to root for. That's where they go. And I'm like, there's a logic to revolutionary defeatism you could argue can kind of apply here, but the idea that it's going to replicate anything like what happened in World War I is, you have a simpleton's notion of history. Like,
that goes back to your literacy comment. I mean, Ben does a show on the channel, a philosophy show. It's a philosophy show. I say it one more time. It is a philosophy show. Somehow in the conversation, they brought up Russia, Ukraine. I don't remember the context of it. And Stefan, who, is handling it on the TIR end, the moderating end, it was like, dude, the comments were insane, and he had to like ban some people from the comments. He said,
which was funny because neither Stefan nor Ben are particularly pro U.S. intervention in Ukraine. like Ben's on record for.
We're calling Stefan. What do they call him? I forget what they called him. But it's funny because Stefan, for what it's worth, we can make fun of him all we want, but he
served in an army.
He did it. He snuck in a country and did the damn thing. So it's fascinating to me, and this is just in the online context. It's fascinating to me that people were mad more so at the title than I think the article itself, because I think it attacks what it is. Like, that's who you've decided you are. You are a leftist, so there's a garb you wear, and there's a way you want to carry yourself, and
right now it's whether or not you're the Russian flag emoji leftist or the Ukrainian flag emoji leftist. and my ironic response to this, but I actually mean it, is now anyone I see with a flag on their emoji, I no longer take seriously. Like, it's just like, oh, you think it can be signified that way? You're stupid. I mean, just because it's not the American flag doesn't mean that you're not signifying something as vapid as that. And I say this as a person who's like actually really worried about the European response to Russia and like what NATO's doing. I am really worried about it, actually.
I mean, these are the things that we talk about when we're alone in a room. You know what I mean? Sometimes we're boring dudes when we're all fucking in a room together. And I do love being a fly on those walls when we're all together listening. But It
And it's
makes
not
me
just me
sad.
calling people stupid. That's it. A lot of what like we can be honest about a lot of what Varn does. It's just like, God damn, these motherfuckers are dumb.
It's
Like,
raw. I'll say this much. It's very raw when we're all together in a room. It's very funny, and I think it's very raw. As another one of those people in the room is in a room next to me right now. And we're probably going to talk some shit when I hang up this call with you. It. I don't think if you saw us all, if you didn't know what we did and you saw us all hanging out at a cafe, I think the last thing you would think is we're a bunch of fucking, or a bar rather, with you and the gentleman in my room.
I only drink a couple times a year, so.
Well, then it'll be every time. Then it's like that's the funny Derick. We're gonna.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is with me, there's funny Derick drunk, and then there's the reason why I don't drink that much is once you have more than like 4 beers, there is dark, pensive, will fight you for anything.
So you're Dave Mustaine. Look, we're not trying to get you kicked out of Metallica. So
right, yeah, like
maybe you can have some espresso shots with me.
Yeah, I tend to be fine at 2 drinks. After 4, you can even ask my audience. They know because I've gotten on the Discord drunk and like challenged the entire room to a knife fight.
Good luck.
Like,
I look forward to the next live thing we do. Is we've been talking about doing something in your hood in Salt Lake, and me and Ben talked with TJ about it the other day. And when we get done, I'll talk to you about it more. But I hate the fact that I see cats that I physically see cats when I cross the imaginary line more so that really feel like they have to wear this shit like it's Nikes. And I'm just like, man, are you going to grow out of it? Is it a phase?
So like your commie t-shirt, how's that different from a band t-shirt, motherfucker? Like if this was more like if the left was more, I don't know, like a church or something, I might take it more seriously because we'd also be having sports leagues together. We'd socialize together. We'd drink together. By that it can be coffee. I mean, there was a Socialist Temperance League, just to remind people that, socialists have always been pro everything. But I think what people see us like I do not code. I can tell you I move in left-wing circles here in Salt Lake. I don't code as like they often think I'm an outsider because I don't dress like a recent college graduate. I don't use a lot of left-wing social code. Like I got no problem saying my pronouns, but I'm just old and I don't think to do it. Like and I'm definitely not going to put it in a bio unless you make me. So like that kind of stuff, like those are social signals. And I actually remember telling my girlfriend when I started moving these things that like I've been abroad for so long, I don't even know what these signals are anymore. Like they have changed profoundly from when I left in 2009 and when I came back in 2017. And like I've finally caught up, but it's taken like 4 years. And I'm fairly well educated. How do you think, like when people say, oh, you're just being polite, I'm like, people don't know your social codes. It really is hard to keep up unless you are very integrated in our community. But or in our brand, let's be honest. But at the same time, most of these things don't do stuff like socialize together and do this. Like, I mean, Anton Yeager came on the show and talked about this. Like, used to be like if you were a communist, like you did stuff with the communists, you bowled with the communists.
That's
like,
what so Mac that does a sports show with me lives in Fayetteville. Used to be military for years. He's a leftist, right? Military turned him out. And he's like, Jason, man, I'm trying to start a communist Pop Warner football league, man. He's like, you know how hard that shit is? And it's not just because he's in Fayetteville. It's just hard.
It's hard
if I had a kid and someone was like, I'm starting a football league, and my kid was old enough to play and wanted to play, I probably wouldn't ask what the political affiliation of that league was, right? And if it was on the under a communist socialist league, it just is what it is. And I don't know why we're disconnected with that level of politics. With as small as we are, why don't we even try to build little communities like that? Like, why is that even so fucking hard to do?
No, I mean that was the one of the only benefits I used to say about the DSA is DSA. I mean, I know your friend in the other room disagrees with me, but that was actually something that's like, okay, well, at least we now have a place to socialize together. We are not just talking theory. And you know what? People pushed back on that and just wanted it to be fucking canvassing all the time. And I'm just like, no, there's
because organizing is the goal, right? I think people miss the goal. People don't, again, they're disconnected from power. People miss the goal. Is the goal throwing a can of soup at a cop and shutting down a freeway? If so, what do you do afterwards? Then what?
right. I mean, is the goal occupy itself, as David Graeber used to say, or is it something afterwards? Because occupy itself isn't going to last very long. And I think that, that is kind of a key point that we should all take about this is if the left is going to be more than a lifestyle brand, it actually has to be a lifestyle, a community. And we have to support each other, and we have to do the hard shit, not just the and the fun shit. And we don't do either. We don't do either the hard shit. Canvassing is not hard, motherfuckers. I know people say it is, but it's just because you're socially alienated. Or and you're gonna have to do the fun shit. That's how communities are built. Churches do that shit for a reason. They're not as good at it anymore.
Yeah,
but that's why, and
well, wasn't that the fun we were having though at the thing in LA?
Yeah, but you know what's funny? Like the thing in LA for me, it's like, okay, I'm like, it's a networking opportunity for my show, not gonna lie. And it's for us to socialize and build a stronger community. And people are like, well, why aren't you talking about X, Y, Z? What's the purpose of this? I'm like, the community building is part of the purpose. Yes, there is a commercial element to it. I can promise you no one's getting rich off of it. I promise. I promise. People who get rich do not live in TJ because they can't afford an apartment in California. So, and that is multiple parties in that group. So like yes, this is commodified. Yes, it's parasocial, but it's also social. In fact, it's trying to make the parasocial into social, and that actually is important. Like, if I know my fans, they are not just fans, they are something else. They maybe not be my friends, but they're part of my community.
Yeah, and I want to get these people all together, and the next step in this kind of let's go into meet spaces and actually go see people is to take this show on the road. And I think we may start dicking around with that Tuesday, because neither one of us have Valentine's, and I've been trying to get our boy out to the Rainbow in LA. You know, do you know the Rainbow in LA? You might know of it. I don't know if you've.
I know of it. I have not been there because my first visit to LA, Jason, was, well, my second visit. My first visit was at the airport, hitting on an Iranian woman by accident in 2013. My second visit, I'm just gonna get myself canceled for that, but whatever. My second visit was to see you. Like, I'd never really gotten more than a couple of blocks away from the airport before.
Well, sadly, I wish we would have had more time, and we did have a bunch of fun. And I know you stayed an extra time and party with Cuba, and then while I went back home to Mexico, and by party, I mean, fucking just hung out.
I was to say, we sobered up, got breakfast, and then drove to San Diego.
It wasn't that crazy.
Oh no, we got lunch with Ben too. And I met Ben Burgess's family. I'll leave it at that. Like,
it's you know, to take this thing on the road and do it the way. Oh, okay. You want to come say what's up?
Come on in. We got room.
I've been farting in here. It's kind of warm.
Hey. talking about the TJ contingent. How you doing?
We're not roommates. We just live in the same building.
Yeah, I came by. We were actually at our next door neighbor's place to watch the game, and so I just came by to drop off Jason's food, but thought thought I'd say hi.
Hi.
Watch Varn vlog, people, because you never know who's just going to stop by randomly. In real life, this isn't even, look, he's not CGI or anything. I'm touching the actual Ben Burgess.
For those people who think like Ben lives in like a yacht compound off of his book money, like somewhere
no
off
does
of
not live in a yacht compound. I will confirm as a compound. I will. You know what we call this place now, D? What I call it? I don't know if Ben calls it this. I call it Podcast Manor.
Yeah, Red Tit Podcast Matter is not exorbitant. Let's say that.
No. The only cool thing about Podcast Manor is no one knows how to get here, so you can feel like Bruce Wayne in that regard.
Well, and you get pretty good food for cheap, let's be honest.
Except it's not like you're like driving through like the cave with all the like elaborate tech in it. Like you're driving up this like dirt road that you have to take it like 3 miles an hour, or else it's gonna fuck up your shocks.
Ben goes, it's not even a dirt road, Jason. It's just dirt. That's where we live. Like we live. Like yeah. Ben was on assignment the other day when the water went out.
Oh,
were I swear to God, every time the water goes out, he gets a fucking speaking engagement. The luckiest man in the world. I was so mad. The water was. I was like, where the fuck Ben's in fucking speaking in some debate with some douchebag right winger, and I'm sitting here with a bucket.
Yeah.
So this is the real life.
But yes, for people who think that like Jacobin pays like suitcases of cash every fortnight. This is at least I get to go places, and I've gotten pretty lucky about the water, although I have been here a couple times. It's been out.
Luckily we have a well that he doesn't know how to use yet. We should record that. We should actually do a video of me showing you how to turn the well on. All right, Ben, you got to prime the pump. Yeah, the crystal. That's how we get the real subscribers, Varn. We got to get the back. You know what I regret? Real talking, what I regret? Not having more fun footage of us driving there, listening to fucking screamo at crazy levels, flying down the freeway with Jordan.
Oh yeah, like some of those conversations were pretty hilarious. Yeah, because we drove in your beat up ass car from San Diego to LA, like, and like I don't mean to insult the good nature of Jason's car, but it seemed better days. And why fix it? Because you're driving on dirt most of the time. So.
Yeah, dude. I popped 6 tires since I've been here. Fucking 6 tires since I've been here. I popped, dude. I've only been here like a year and a half. 6 tires.
I haven't popped that many tires in like several years.
Yeah, I'm gonna head back to my wing of Podcast Matter, but I left
the thank you. Thank you. I heard Eagles won. No, Chiefs won.
No, the Chiefs won. It was actually like really like you missed a second half for the ages. It was like 35 until like literally I think actually when the Chiefs got actually won it, like they had like
don't tell me I'm gonna watch. There's a people on YouTube that'll play it back. Don't tell me, I don't want to hear anything about it.
Yeah I can watch this is getting renamed as the Jason Myles Super Bowl special. Am
I gonna see you in the morning? Or are you busy?
Yeah,
you want to go to Fat Cat. Let's do Fat Cat. Peace, Lucy. That's what, dude. When you come out here, we're gonna take you to Fat Cat. It's just gonna change your life.
All right. Well,
no, man. Look, I was talking to a friend last night, and I was telling him about Ben moving down here, and the first thing my friend says, "I'm so happy that you have someone down there now."
So the funny thing is, I remember when you told me you were going to do this. You're like Derick, it's a good idea to move to Mexico, and I was like, yeah, if you know how to do it, like just it's great. It's cheap. It's so much fucking cheaper. And yeah, and what's funny is since you've done it, I've had many people approach me like, Varn, how do I move to Mexico? And I'm like, well, I mean, okay, like, do you want to go? Do you want to go to TJ, or do you want to go to like the really cheap but dangerous
Yeah,
part?
there's different
Like,
parts of this place, man.
you want to go to
All
the
of this
super
motherfucker,
peaceful, but there's no internet part? Like,
it's all not created equal, and I definitely happened upon a part that I'm still figuring out. I'm still learning. I love the community here that Ben and I have been able to forge. Like you said, we were at our neighbor's house beforehand, and
it's a lot more Americans in Mexico than people realize. And
there's a
everyone's
lot more, especially in the neighborhood that I kind of fell into. And it wasn't like I got to see the neighborhood beforehand. I drove here at night where there was no lights, and the lady opened the door to the place, and I said, whatever I have to do to move in here, I need to live here. And so then I saw the people later, and we can do a whole show on.
Yeah, we should talk about
pickleball.
Mexico sometime. One thing I like to tell people when they're like, I'm going to leave the US, I'm going to move to Canada. I'm like, if you're serious about leaving, you're going to move to Mexico, because it's going to cost you to do it. The most hard and most legit way is going to cost you at most $300, and then rent, and then like a deposit, which is also not going to be super high. And like, that's the hardest way. Whereas in Canada, it's going to cost you $15,000 minimum.
To get to be a citizen in Canada is like really difficult, super expensive to live out there. It's not, I mean, ask Cuba, it's not cheap.
Whereas like Mexico, like, I'm like, I'll take you seriously on your anti-racism when you're moving to Mexico. Okay. Because like, no, and I don't mean just go visit and stay in Mexico City and like fuck up the economy by telecommuting from there. I mean, actually living there. But I've always told people there's more Americans there than you think. Like, there's
Mexico City's having a bit of a problem with gentrification to the point where Mexico City is really trying to push back. The citizens are trying to push back on the gentrifiers. I can't really speak for where I'm at so much. A lot of the build out has been from the US.
You're in a different situation. Mexico City is like basically like people doing commute work as temporary tourism, and it's fucking up their economy. But if you move to a place, I mean, that's TJ's economy, sadly, kind of. Anyway.
It is, and it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to. Look, man, I don't feel comfortable sometimes because of it feels it's a weird.
You feel like a colonizer, Jason?
Someone called me a colonizer. I saw a comment. They said they stopped watching because now I don't work the This Is Revolution Twitter at all. Fuck it. That's not me. Someone said they stopped watching This Is Revolution because I moved here. I was like, that's stupid.
Yeah. That is the weirdest, most nativist interpretation of what colonizer means. This is a discussion for another day. But if anyone moving anywhere else makes them a colonizer, then by that logic, I may add, you actually sound like Donald Trump. Because Jason's not coming to take the good resources of Mexico, nor is he driving up the rent. Now, if a bunch of tech telecommuters come to Mexico City, which A, isn't used to it, and B, like, and they start throwing tons of money around because they don't know what local prices are and they haven't done the research. Yes, that will indeed fuck stuff up. Yes, that is a little bit colonizer-y, I guess. But like, people who are like, well, living anywhere else is like colonize. I'm like, that's the dumbest interpretation.
I just, you take it and you go, oh, that's
also, isn't Mexico a settler colonial state too? Just like
don't tell them that. They don't want to hear that.
I do like to remind them the Spanish did take it away from the Mexica, who themselves took it away from the other indigenous tribes in the area.
I want to have a long conversation with them about Benito Juarez.
Oh, ooh.
You know what I mean?
Ooh, that will deeply upset people when I talk about Benito Juarez.
There is a school. So me and Ben were walking down the street, right? And there's a school, and it had a picture of Abe Lincoln and Benito Juarez. And I was like, why is there a picture? I was like, is that Abe Lincoln? And I said, Ben, am I seeing this wrong? Is that Abe Lincoln? And Ben goes, Ben, that looks like Abe Lincoln. And I'm like, okay. And then there was like a yard monitor guy that happened to speak English. And I was like, is that Abe Lincoln? And the guy was like, yep, that's Abe Lincoln. And, briefly, do you want to tell people why Abe Lincoln would be next to Benito Juarez in a mural?
Briefly, the United States actually supported Benito Juarez when France sent in people to take over with the blessing of the conservative faction of the Mexican government to take over the government, and Benito went into sanctuary in the United States and was supported by the U.S., which is really interesting when you consider it's only like half a generation away from the Mexican-American War.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, you want to talk about like weird cultural history, like most Americans, even most left-wing Americans, don't really know the interrelationship between America and Mexico, except for that we stole half of their claimed territory, and they usually claim more territory than the Mexicans actually had formal charter over, but that's not here nor there. The real interesting part of that to me, though, is like they didn't skip the relations until maybe the Mexican Revolution, which they also don't understand. I'm like, yeah, the U.S. was actually like the Mexican liberals actually sided with the U.S. to fight against the Europeans to kick the French out. Like, I mean, they were still mad. I mean, there's a whole mural if you go to Mexico City about how we chased 8 kids over a cliff protecting the American flag. Something that you're not taught in U.S. schools at all.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a whole Benito Juarez thing. Also, while Benito Juarez is intensely popular in Mexico, he's the person who really pushed de-indigenization. And he's
who else
indigenous.
was pushing that in the Americas? Good old Abe.
Yeah. Like, so you want to get into the complications of American politics and Mexican politics. Both those figures are really weird and really important and hard to deal with.
But that's the oversimplification back to the whole reading, the way you consume media. And maybe we could end on this. This is a great note to maybe
tie it
wrap
up here.
up on, is because of the oversimplification and the fact that we don't want to have any sort of discussion outside of a very binary one. We don't understand that, and it's just either all good or all bad. I learned Columbus didn't really discover America. All bad. Yeah, it's all bad. Sure, but everything isn't always Columbus in America and Howard Zinn.
You want to know something really hard people have a hard time dealing with that I teach people? They hear about the people in the Confederacy that tried to take over Latin American countries, but what they often don't know is like the Confederacy during and this isn't to defend the Confederacy, this is just a weirdness of history, is that you were seen as being able to be good to either the Black cause or the Natives cause, but not both, because the Union was really into expansion westward. And the Confederacy actually was talking about making deals with the tribes. So it is Union generals who lead the Indian Wars. And that's something that, yeah, I mean, sure, that I am certain that the Confederates would have reneged on it immediately had they have the capacity to do so. This is not me, like, I love to spit on Confederate stuff when I'm at home. It's like a pastime.
You're not rewriting history.
I'm not, yeah. But I do. You do have to admit that, like, if you read the stuff from the 19th century, for example, Mark Twain, really good for the time. It's racist by modern terms, but really good for the time on Black issues. But you read him on Native Americans and indigenous people. Oh my God! I mean, and it's really hard to explain unless you know this stuff about like the Union being associated with Western expansion. And And so, like, there is that issue. Now, it's even more complicated than that. And in 5 minutes, I can't get to all the history
Do you
of
think
it.
Stephen Kinzer has some good books on the? Do you like his books on?
Yeah, I
on
do.
Westward Expansion?
Yeah, I do. I like Stephen Kinzer's books, and I like um there's a bunch of books that I would tell people to read on Westward Expansion. And if you can read Spanish, you should read a bunch of Mexican M books on the Mexican American War, and then read the few English books about it. Um, uh, because that also gets complicated, because who sided with the Mexicans tended to be other religious Catholics, but a lot of them actually were also racist. And the reason why they were siding with the Mexicans is they didn't want to try to incorporate or exterminate all those brown people. Like, that was part of the lot. I mean, and it's gross, but it's like, well, there's like, so you can't say like, oh, well, this side is clearly racist and the other side isn't. Like, no, there's racist on both sides. Like, and some of the logic for why they were doing things that were probably good, because the United States wanted to take all the way down to Mexico City, which is largely forgotten now. And Polk was screwed up by and a diplomat who had Southern leanings, but also like felt like the war was unjust, so he curtailed the claiming of land at Texas. So anyway,
we should have you on the Nailing It Down, do a whole Mexican American history show.
I would love to talk more about Mexican American history. I tell people Mexico is a country I want to die in, man. It's like a second home to me.
You know, you ask me that right now, I might be there with you. We might have side by side gravestones.
Yeah, Cementeria de Gringo, like, you know, that's bad Spanish, but whatever. All right, thank you for coming on, Jason. It's been fun.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm glad we got to throw a special guest in the loop. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah,
I'm really excited. I'm just going to throw this out in the ether. When is this going to go live?
About 2 weeks, probably.
Okay. Well, we won't be doing this by that time, but we're going to be coming to Salt Lake to do something. Don't know exactly what with Derick, but it's definitely on the routing. I'll talk to you more about that.
Locals come out and hang out with us in Utah.
That's probably what it's going to look like. We're a little hang, and we'll figure out what we're going to call it and all that other shit. Particulars later with, of course, super producer Jordan. But yeah, I'm excited to see you again and hang out, man.
It'd be nice. We have space up here in the mountains. We don't have a lot of water though, so there's that problem.
That's fine.
You don't have water half the time anyway. All right.
Yeah.
And on that note, good night.